Well, welcome back, lovely listeners, to this episode, which is part 2 of my interview with the wonderful Doriette McIvor Stone. As you will have heard if you listened to part 1, Doriette is an absolutely, just pinnacle linchpin assistant. And she's somebody that I have a high degree of respect for. And I loved this interview with her, and I hope you enjoyed part 1. And with no further ado, I'd like to bring you part 2, where we continue to explore weaving in and out of Doriette's experience navigating the career spider frame and how she sees herself in her role as executive assistant in terms of the value that she adds and the value that she brings to her executive. So enjoy part 2 of my interview with Doriette McIvor Stone, and make sure you look at the links in the show notes for the interview that Doriette did with my friend Candace Birmingham over at Admin Avenues, as well as the LinkedIn, the way to connect with Doriette on the wonderful platform that is LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining me on Being Indispensable. My name's Liz Van Vliet. We're all dispensable. I know that better than anyone. I'm a breast cancer survivor. But that doesn't mean that we can't invest in ourselves to improve the skills and capabilities that are going to help us stand out and be perceived as indispensable. Indispensable is also about the being side of the equation. Because if we're not looking after ourselves and our own well-being, then we have no hope of showing up as indispensable in the workplace. It occurred to me when you were talking about your CEO, this was something else you talked about in the article in Admin Avenues. You talked about the fact that because you were married to a CEO, you had that insight into the way their minds work. Can you tell the listeners, tell me more about this? What do you mean by, what insight do you think that an EA needs to have about the way a CEO's mind works?
Okay, so it was great experience, I have to say, because I was totally on the other side, and I actually was not an EA to a CEO at that time or prior. It was after, so that I could put that experience to really good use. So I always feel that when their wives call, that is the most important thing. They need something, and for them, that is the most important thing in their day. So when he's not available and the annoyance starts, that's when I know I have to communicate at a level where I make them feel that that is the most important part of his day.
Right.
Even though I know that the washing machine breaking down that day is so far removed from his life. And so I just work with them to give them the comfort that I will get the message to him as soon as I can. And sometimes I offer to, I'll sort it out for you. What do you need? What can I do? You're not going to be home when he comes? Fantastic. I'll arrange for someone to be there. I'll be there myself. Where's the key? Whatever it happens to be, and not involve him at all, or her, not involve them at all. Just to accept that whatever is happening in their day is just as important. It's very easy to say, oh, well, that's not my role. But let me assure you, the way I look at it is that anything I take off his plate is making his world far better and easier, and it's allowing him to do his job. In past companies, that's what my bonus was actually reflected on. While he's focusing on the business, I get a bigger bonus, okay? That may not be the case for everyone, but that's the way I looked at it. If I'm running around doing X, Y, and Z, that means he's in the office working on my bonus and everybody else's bonus. He's working on a pitch, working on a sale, working on his strategy or whatever it happens to be, not waiting in the sandwich queue or getting his dry cleaning. Like, none of those jobs are a problem for me, because I just focus on the bigger picture. I'm allowing him to do his job.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. And I know that can be really, I hear people talking about that as, no, I don't do that sort of thing for my exec. And I am, I'm in your camp. To me, that is sort of, it's about what's the return on investment. The return on investment for the company is his or her, if it's a female exec as well, their time is more valuable. And your job as an EA, and this, I talk about this when I'm training, is, the bottom line is, as an EA, your job is to return and invest, is to deliver a return on investment for the leader that you support. Whatever way you do that is adding value. And so it's, but all this stuff about, I'm not going to do the personal things, well, that's up to you at the end of the day. But I think that it can just be a little bit, can be a generational thing, I think, as well.
I do agree with you. It's definitely a generational thing. But it's actually sometimes the far more interesting thing, I find, is, and it also makes you more indispensable.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I know when I was doing the role of an EA, as an EA supporting the exec that I supported, it really did build my relationship with my exec to be able to take those things off his plate. And it really did make a difference in our relationship in taking it to that next level, from being just that transactional, I'm doing the things associated with the role that he performs as an executive, to really going behind the curtain, so to speak, in terms of him as a human being. This is his life that I'm assisting him with. And it was adding value.
Absolutely. And I think I said this in the interview with Candice, is that I've always approached this job as a service job, not as an admin role. It's service, right? Because that's what I know, right? My background is sales and events.
Yeah.
And, I started, my very first job was working as a company cadet for a department store. So that's where they trained you to become a manager. So it started with grassroots. It's service. It was really interesting what happened, because you first of all, the first year you spend 2 months with one manager, 2 months, and then they obviously assess you, and you're going to college at night. So I did a management course at night, and then you had a training and development manager, and you sat with them, every month, and you did programs like on problem solving, team building, and plus the admin tasks with running a department, with running a section of the business. And I remember thinking when I finish this, I actually don't want to be in stores. I want to be the training and development manager. I want to train the next group. But when I said that, when I graduated, they said, no, it doesn't work like that. You need to be in stores. And I left soon after. I stayed in retail, but I left soon after. And then 2 years later, I came back to Grace Brothers as their training and development manager. So, and then I had my own little company cadets and management trainees. And I did that for a number of years. Oh, can't hear you. Can't hear you. It's gone on mute.
Fine.
That's better.
Amazing. That is such an interesting story.
Yeah, so that's so then I did that. That's how the sales and the service started from that, and then it just continued from there.
Wow, that is so interesting. So that is another piece of the Doriette spider frame that explains your business acumen, your commercial acumen, and what made you such a great, you could hit the ground running supporting a CEO because you knew you had all of this knowledge of, running businesses.
Well, that's true, but I also treat everybody as a customer. So everybody that wants something from me is a customer, whether it be management team, staff, someone on the phone.
Yeah.
And that's how I see myself. And I know there are many people out there that would disagree with me, but it's worked for me. It's worked for me for a long time.
Yeah.
And I had one CEO that I worked for say to me when I did leave, Doriette, I did not know what I did not have until you got here.
Wow.
And I remember those words because they were up there as really knowing just how grateful he was for the different style that I had. It just cemented that I was definitely on the right path if I had any doubt, which I didn't.
So I'm curious to know, in terms of onboarding and building new relationships with the CEOs that you've worked with, what's the process that you go through? How do you approach that?
I wish I could actually, when you ask, this may not be the same for everybody, but having ethnic parents from Mediterranean background, when you ask your grandmother how you cook something, and they just go, a little bit of this and that, and you'll know the sauce won't be thick enough, and this, and you just walk away when you're about 10 going, I just want to learn how to cook that, and you want it written down, and there's no writing of anything down. It's very similar. Again, it's the instinctiveness, it's that emotional intelligence. With the gentleman I'm working for now, it took me longer to develop that because he wasn't used to it.
Okay.
So it's the CEO that I worked with at Fremantle Media. His emotional intelligence and instinctiveness was absolutely off the Richter scale. That was a complete hand-in-glove approach. I just literally met him, walked through the door, started, and from day one, it just worked. So sometimes it needs time, and it also needs trust.
Yeah.
And
do you think that the relationship you've got with your current CEO was impacted because of the big C?
Definitely. My very first day, the night before, I had my lunch in a box, my brand new dress hanging, everything ready to go, the backpack, done. And I got a call at 8 p.m. that night to say, Doriette, they've closed the office because we are based in the Museum of Contemporary Art. So it was a government building. So they closed the museum or the art. So that's it. They said, don't come in, work from home. We've got a computer coming to you, and just join the 10 o'clock senior management meeting. That was it. And I'm telling you, I am so against people starting a new job and working from home from day one, because it was a month till I could catch up. Mainly because of the way I work. Perhaps for others, that are sort of more process driven, perhaps that's the perfect scenario. But for me, that needs relationships, boy, was that a difficult way to go, because not only did I not know the role, I didn't know who could help me.
Yeah.
And who to go to. And it was awful, absolutely awful. And I would say that's one of the more difficult periods of my life.
Right. Yeah. I'm so sorry. That does sound really hard.
Well, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I'm still breathing, can't complain.
Yeah, but I can tell from what we've discussed, and as you said, that because you're such a relationship-driven operator, and what you've just articulated, that inability to familiarize yourself with who are the go-to people for X, Y, Z, would have made it, you would have been literally operating with one hand tied behind your back, or both hands tied behind your back. It
was awful. And I worked round the clock. Things that would have normally taken 5 minutes just took so much longer. And it was tough. But, as I say, doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. It was just a different way.
Yeah.
And then, when I then came into the office, then it felt like 4 or 5 months later, that was my first day. But then, of course, people were expecting that I would know certain things.
Yeah.
And I had to keep reminding them and saying, just please remember, I've only been in the office for a week. I know you think I've been here 5 months, but really, you need to treat me as though this is my first day, because that's how it feels.
Yeah. Now, within the AOC, how many EAs are there aside from yourself?
One, me. Hello.
So that leads me to my next question. So in terms of EAs and networking, I mean, you sound like somebody who is just very self-directed, self-motivated, doesn't need other people, doesn't rely on other people to know how to do things in terms of your EA role.
Mm-hmm.
Within AOC, is there any other EAs?
There is one other, actually, and she's been here a long time, so she has a wealth of knowledge around the AOC. But I'm the only EA that looks after like the CEO, and then we've got the management team.
Yeah.
So even though I'm not their EA, clearly, we need to work together. So even though there are 2 of us, they're very different roles, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I asked because I have a listener who reached out to me and left me a beautiful audio message saying that one of the reasons she loves listening to the podcast is because she's the only EA in her company. Mm-hmm. And she feels so lonely and isolated being the EA, being the only EA, but also just feeling like as the EA, she just really can't talk to other employees and share things with them. But then she also doesn't have other EAs to share with. Has that been your experience?
I think you're an EA to a CEO, you're always going to be between a rock and a hard place, because you're not always regarded as management, but then you're not always regarded as all staff. So really, it is a lonely role. But I think it's you that needs to change and adapt. And I can be easily one of the staff and just, work my way through it. But I can also be part of the management team. So again, I've been told over the years that I'm a chameleon. And I do say that I can be whatever you want. So, but again, that takes that emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Yes. And see, that I think is another attribute that if you don't already have on your resume, you darn well should, is your adaptability. You are extremely adaptable. It's so apparent in everything you talk about, your adaptability.
You have to be, because everything is changing around you constantly. And it is just going so fast. If you are not adaptable, and just because it was always done one way, or just because you always had it that way, it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
It's what is happening at that minute.
That is brilliant. Well, is there anything else that we have not talked about that you would like to share with the listeners?
I think being an EA is actually, it's a privilege. And it's both a privilege and an honour. That's the way I see it. I have had an amazing career because of the different industries that I've worked in, but also because of the different personalities I've worked with as well. And I do believe, I never thought this would be where I would land. And when I think about younger Doriette, all I wanted to be was a flight steward. That was it. That's all I ever wanted to be. And I was too short, and in those days you had to be a certain height, and there was none of that. And so even though I applied, of course I was never accepted. And I remembered being absolutely devastated about that. But time moves on, and even though there'll be many EAs out there that went down that traditional route through, perhaps doing communications, or, going through some kind of old-fashioned secretarial school, or whatever it happens to be. Just because you haven't done that doesn't mean you can't be an EA and you can't land where you need to land. You just need to trust it.
That's brilliant. Yep, I love that. Yeah, thanks, Doriette. I mean, I've started referring to the EAs that I meet. They're either there in their roles for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. It's like friends.
Absolutely. I love that saying. It's very, very true.
Yeah. And it's brilliant because, that's absolutely right. And I love the fact that, like, for somebody that, came to the role, for a reason, and you've just thrived in the role and absolutely made it your own. It's amazing. It's just brilliant to see.
I think making it your own is really important in every job. You're never going to have all the skills you need in any role. And if some things are just too time consuming, or you don't believe that that they're actually assisting you, then try and outsource them. If you can. I mean, some companies may not allow you to do that. It may not be someone's natural go-to, but let me assure you, work on the skills that you are great at and you'll always shine.
Love it. That's great advice. Brilliant.
They are a customer and they need to be served. And, sadly, a lot of that is lost these days, both, in the service industry as well as...
That is so interesting because because I have a sales background as well, we're so similar.
We are.
Because when I train, I talk about the idea of assistants thinking of themselves as salespeople.
Oh, wow. I've never heard anybody ever say that. They all think I'm crazy.
Yeah, no, I tell them, I talk about the fact that you need to think of you need to adopt the mindset that it's your idea to sell. It's not the other person's responsibility to buy. It's your idea. It's your responsibility to sell what you need, what you need for your exec, for your manager. You need to sell to the person, and you need to, so you are a marketer, you are a salesperson, you are a customer service person. I talk about all of those things. So you are like the embodiment of that. That is brilliant.
It's so true. I strongly believe in that. And it's also, your language around that. And I'll give you an example, which can't go on the podcast. When I took over from the lady before me, she said, oh, he's really self-sufficient. Like in the 3 years or whatever I worked for him, he won't even let me make him a cup of tea, right? And I was like, really? Find that very odd. Anyway, my other boss was the biggest tea fanatic, and he would let me do anything for him, whatever he wanted, And I remember when I first came into the office, I used to say, can I get you a cup of tea? Oh no, I'm good, thanks. And then a second later he'd go to the kitchen and make it himself. And this went on for I asked him every single day for about maybe 6 weeks. And I thought, this is not working. And then the next day, I thought, I need to change my sales approach to this. Exactly what I said. And then I said, I'm making myself a cup of tea. Can I make you one? Oh, Doriette, that would be lovely. And now I've created a monster where it's like, hey, Doriette, tea would be nice.
There you go.
And it makes me happy. It's crazy because I feel like I've won, I've sold, I've closed the deal. Right?
Yes.
That's how it makes me feel. I've closed the deal and I am happy as Larry, right? While someone else would think, oh, thank God he doesn't want me to make him tea. It's great. I just love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, that is brilliant. I love it. Yeah. So just to finish off, because I'm conscious of the time, I think it's been wonderful that throughout this interview, we've been able to have all of these little nuggets to share just naturally that people will have landed with the listeners. But when we think about advice that you would want to be passing on, if you think about advice that you might want to pass on to admin professionals, to EAs that might be early in their career about things like communication, or about things like influencing when you're not in charge, when you are an EA. And I often talk about the fact that, I see EAs who rely on that sort of pseudo authority of, oh, I work for somebody really important, so you need to do what you need to do what I want. What advice would you give them that you feel you could have benefited from when you first started in the role?
Most important aspect would be to treat everybody at every level at the same. And you can learn from everyone at every level. And I make sure that if I see a cleaner coming in at the end of the day, that I thank them for their job, because everybody's job is important. And just in your passing, just remember what people tell you, that you might just overhear that, on the weekend they're doing this. So as you're flying through on a Monday, just comment, oh, how did your mother's 60th party go? Or, did you end up going to that play? What was it like? Like, people talk, you just need to listen and remember.
Yeah.
Especially when you know that things are important to them.
Love it.
That always helped me, without a doubt. Because then people know they can approach you. And that's what it's all about. Also, too, always being the middle person between what they need and who they need it from. Because a lot of people are still they're not really confident about knocking on the CEO's door, regardless of how approachable they are. So they come to you and they say, Doriette, this is what I'm after. So just get the top line and make it happen. Then if you need more information, then I'll just say, listen, I'm just going to go and grab so-and-so and bring them in. And then that starts to build their confidence as well. But then also, too, they're not just coming in cold, especially with a younger group of people who may not be quite used to that hierarchy of working in an office.
I love that. I love that you're all about elevating other people. That's what's at the heart of that. I think that's really wonderful. I really love that. That's a wonderful message to finish on. Thanks, Doriette. Is there anything else that you would like to leave the listeners with?
Not right now. I'm sure there will be. I'm sure there will be. But you've really made me think about a few things, actually, which has been wonderful. So I really appreciate the questions that you've asked.
Please, that's lovely. I wish we had more time, but as like all fabulous EAs, and you are one of those, your exec comes first. So, I'm conscious of the time, and I don't want to get in the way of you supporting your exec. So, listeners, we're going to wrap it up there. So, Doriette, I'm going to put the links in the show notes, as I said, to that Admin Avenues article. If listeners would like to get in contact with you, is your LinkedIn, putting your LinkedIn connection the best way for me to do that, to put them in contact with you?
Absolutely, of course. And they can contact me at any time. More than happy to help.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the Assist with Impact podcast. And I can tell you that was a delicious meal.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased you enjoyed it. I hope you've got room for dessert.
Oh, yes, definitely. I'll have to have you back for dessert.
That sounds ominous.
Thanks for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, head over to my website. It would be great if you haven't already done so. If you enjoyed the show, if you could kindly go to iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people find the show. Thanks for listening and have a great week.